Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome again. Thank you for being here with us for our, I believe, 46th Med Mentor Monday panel of the academic year. Tonight, we'll be talking about different activities and opportunities that pre-meds can do during the summer. We'll be answering a lot of the questions we got from the RSVP form, but if anyone attending would like to ask a question, feel free to send them in whenever through the Q&A chat. Okay, so oh, I'm sorry, we're missing one panelist. Yes, sorry about that. Let me promote you to panelist. Okay. Give her just a moment. Okay. Great, sorry about that, welcome. Okay, so maybe we can just start off with some brief introductions. Maybe the panelists can share their names, where they're from, and whether you applied to med school directly after undergrad or if you had any, gap years. And I can just start. So I'm Martina, I'll be the moderator for tonight. Oh, I'm an MS, I guess technically an MS3. I just finished MS2. And I'm from Miami. I don't remember if I said that. And I took one gap year.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name's Asin. I'm from San Diego, and I went to UCLA for undergrad, and I went straight through.
I'm Zoe. I'm a MS4. I'm from Massachusetts, and I also went straight through, but I graduated a semester early, so I had a little bit of time just to relax.
I'm from Rancho Cucamonga, California. I went to undergrad at MIT, and then I went straight through at UCLA. And I'm part of the Drew and Prime program, in case anyone has questions about that too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony. I'm an MS1, and I'm from Irvine, California. And I took one gap year before going to UCLA.
Awesome. Thank you all. Okay, so maybe we can start off with a basic question. So what activities were you involved in during your undergraduate summers? Like, what were some of the main ones you can remember?
I guess I can start. For me, I guess like in my 4 years of undergrad, 2 of my summers, freshman and sophomore year, I did summer session over the summer. I went to UCI for undergrad, so I did summer session so I could get some classes under my belt, especially because of I wanted to do a minor in psychology, and so I did some classes in summer for that. And then in subsequent summers, my third year, I had a teaching job, so that's what I did during my third year summer, and then during my fourth year summer, that was kind of my gap year. So I started doing a scribe job during that time. So yeah.
I can go next. So for the summers between my first and second, and then my second and third year, I worked at a biotech company in San Diego as an intern in their neuroscience department. So I did basic science research, mostly working in the lab. It was really great because I had continuity there for 2 summers. And then between my junior and senior year, I was taking the Mcat. So I was studying for the Mcat and then also applying to med school. So I didn't have an internship then. And I really just focused on my applications. And yeah, that's what I did.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So yeah, for during the summers, like the summer before I started undergrad, I did this like intro to undergrad kind of thing for 6 weeks where you like live in and you take a bunch of classes before school starts to kind of prepare you for freshman year. So I was a TA for that program the summer between my freshman and sophomore year and the summer between junior and senior year when I was applying to med school. And that was really great because you like basically are like a live-in RA that like teaches like maybe 2 hours of the week. And other than that, you like got free food and were able to like focus on like applying to med school and stuff like that. And then between sophomore and junior year, I did an internship out in Irvine for a biotech company that makes like heart devices and things like that. And it was a really cool summer, mainly because at that point I wasn't sure if I was going to go into medicine, and it kind of like helped me make that decision. And I also took the Mcat that summer.
I can go next. So I think the summer before and after my freshman year, I worked as a volunteer at a hospital doing like transport and in the emergency department. And then I had been working as a camp counselor like throughout high school, and I really liked it. It was like with my hometown, so I kind of kept doing that, but not, not that many hours or that many weeks. But I did that kind of like throughout college almost. And then also after freshman year, before sophomore year, I worked on getting my CNA license, so that I could start working as a nursing assistant during school and during like the next summer. So, and then after sophomore year, that's kind of when I took when I was studying for the Mcat, because I knew I didn't, like at that time I didn't want to take a gap year. So I had already finished all of my chemistry and like bio classes at that time. So I studied for like 3 months for the Mcat, and then there was like 1 day a week where I would like work as a CNA. And then, I think there was maybe a week where I was a camp counselor. And then after my junior year, that's like when I was applying to med schools. And I got a job as a medical assistant, like without a certification, at a derm practice. And that was really fun because that was like really working with patients and kind of doing what you do in med school of like getting a history from patients and then talking to doctors and assisting with like procedures. So that was really great. And yeah, I feel like those are the main things that I did in my summers.
Great.
I
And
can
then,
go next I think, did everybody get to go?
yeah.
Okay, awesome. I joined a little bit late. My name's Michaela. I'm an MS1. Question is, what activities were you involved in during undergrad summers? During the summer, so I started out on the swim team at UC Santa Barbara, and I spent like the whole summer training. But I think my freshman year summer, I knew I wanted to do something involved in medicine, but I didn't know if I really wanted to go that route. So I shadowed a doctor that was like the dad of one of the kids on the swim team that I grew up on. So I think just like using any connections, no matter how distant they are, can be really helpful. But he was a surgeon, and so I shadowed him over the summer. And I also just like took some classes that I couldn't fit in during the year of my first year. My sophomore year summer, I was still on the swim team, and so I was training that whole summer and taking classes. And then I also started working at a clinical research center in the town that I was going to college in Santa Barbara. And it was diabetes research. So we actually did research on like diabetic devices, like continuous glucose monitors and artificial pancreases. And I really liked that it was an intersection of research and of clinical work, because a lot of my friends were doing like lab work, but I just couldn't see myself sitting in a lab all day. And I also wanted to kind of walk the line of research and clinical care because I didn't know which one I wanted to go into. So that was super helpful. And I actually ended up working full-time at that job years later in my gap years. And it's really influenced the things I'm interested in. And then junior summer, I was no longer on the swim team, so I had a little bit more time. And so I just dedicated more hours to the clinical research at the Diabetes Research Institute. But each of these summers, I also spent like 10 days to 2 weeks on different global medical brigades trips. One was in Panama, one was in Nicaragua, and one was in Honduras. I really was interested in global healthcare, but I kind of started to have some moral issues with whether the brigades I was working with was actually helping or harming, which is like a whole nother thing I could get into if people are interested. But yeah, I think those are all the summers during undergrad.
Great. So here, I'm going to put in the chat a more loaded question. So what was maybe one or two of your favorite or best experiences? What did you learn from it, and how did you talk about it in your application?
I can go. I think some of my favorite experiences was being a TA for that summer program that I mentioned, just because I was a part of it as a student, and I know how much the mentorship that I had from upperclassmen like impacted just like my whole undergrad career and like what I decided to do and like people I got to meet. So for me, like really taught me how much I really enjoyed mentorship, how much I really enjoyed teaching, and like I think that's something that I want to be part of like a medical career as well. Um, I like didn't mention, but I like did Camp Kesem as well during those summers, as well as like just like research in a lab at like part time. But I think Camp Kesem was also like one of my favorite parts of the year. It's like 1 week, and you work with kids whose like parents have had cancer or currently have cancer. I think that was just like eye opening to me, like how many different ways like you can touch people in the medical sphere, right? Like it's not limited to like care for patients isn't just limited to those who are sick, right? Like people's illnesses really impact families, they impact like communities. And I think getting a better insight of like how to support people through that was really powerful. And I think really helped. I like being able to talk about that in like medical school interviews, and as well as like my application really showed that like you're willing to listen to the whole story. You're trying to figure out like who people are, and like yeah, they're sick, but like what are their goals and priorities in their care, and like do they want treatment to get better for their kid's soccer game or for graduation, and different things like that was really impactful for me. And I think the last like most lasting experience from my summer was when I did do that biotech like internship, because I hated most of it, but there was like one moment where this doctor came in and they make heart valves at this company. So they were teaching us how to put in a mitral valve in a pig heart. So like a surgeon came in and was like teaching all the interns like how they actually use these implants. And that's when I realized like, oh, this has been the most interesting, the most exciting thing that's happened this summer. And it's like the surgical part, it's like hands-on. It's not just creating devices and waiting 10 years for them to get like approved, but it's actually like working with patients and seeing how they directly get impacted by these devices. So for me, that was a really like pivotal moment in terms of like, okay, I think I'm going to go down this route in terms of going into medicine.
I can talk a little bit about some of my favorite experiences. It's hard to choose because I feel like so many experiences guide you in like the final decision of applying to medical school. But I would probably say definitely one of the most impactful was working at the Diabetes Research Center that I was at. I felt like I really got to work closely with patients because we were doing FDA approval trials for these devices that were just life-changing. I worked mainly with type 1 diabetics in my job, but then I did volunteer work with that center as well. That was implementing a Latinx program for people with type 2 diabetes who were primarily Spanish speaking. And it was cool to be involved in something that was very culturally competent. So that was a really cool part of working at that center. I think also the job portion, some of the studies, I would like go to Hawaii and New York with patients, and it would just be me and the research participants / patients. So it was cool to get like very close one-on-one time with these participants and really see their day-to-day life with type 1 diabetes and how it changed with a continuous glucose monitor. I also got to work with pregnant women living with diabetes and do one of the first trials in pregnant women with continuous glucose monitors. And so that was super exciting and made me realize I'm really interested in women's health. So I think that was probably my most impactful experience. I also did in Santa Barbara, there's something called Doctors Without Walls. It's kind of like a spinoff of Doctors Without Borders, but it's just different medical professionals within the Santa Barbara community go out to different parks in Santa Barbara on every Wednesday and Thursday night and provide emergency medical care at no cost for just anyone who wants to come by. So I really loved doing that too, and just being really invested in the community. But yeah, I'll give someone else a chance to talk.
I can go next. So I think my favorite experience was probably like working as a camp counselor. And I just talked, like in my essays, I talked about how I learned a lot from the kids and how it kind of like, you know, building relationships with them is sort of like what, I don't know, sort of something that made me feel like medicine was right for me, because I loved like having those relationships and the mutual respect that you build over time, and like seeing the kids like grow up with like your guidance and everything leads to like kind of like them being able to cope better with their lives, and trying to like mentor them. For a lot of them wanted to become camp counselors themselves, so like mentoring them for like their counselor and training programs, and talking about like leadership skills that you learn from doing those sorts of activities, and like working with other people on a team, like the interpersonal skills that you develop. And I just talked about like kind of like the sense of responsibility that I gained from working that job, like kind of putting other people over myself, and, you know, thinking about other people's needs before my own, and learning about like people in kind of an individual way, and seeing like how knowing someone one-on-one and knowing someone's like specific quirks can help someone like dealing with specific issues for each person. So I kind of related it to being like patient-centered. And then I also really liked that dermatology experience, just because I got to do a lot of stuff before med school that I felt like a lot of other like pre-meds don't necessarily get to do. Like I learned how to do sterile technique before med school, and I was given like the responsibility of like talking to patients one-on-one. And that, I think that like really helped me learn those kind of skills before I was like thrown into it, like in med school with the kind of clinical portion. And so that was really exciting for me. And I feel like on interviews, it felt like it seemed to like matter to the interviewers.
So for me, I think like the two experiences that were really meaningful were the teaching job that I had one summer, and then being a scribe. So I think I'll just talk about the teaching job that I had first. So it was basically, the position was called like tutorial leader, and I was basically responsible for small groups of about like 8 to 16 students. They were all, you know, in the bio major, and they were taking like OChem and physics. And so like that's kind of what I was kind of helping them with, and it was really like all about like small group discussion, small group work, and like active learning and things like that. And I think that through that experience, I really learned that I really like to teach. And I think that that was like something that was really important to me, that not only was I like a teacher for them to just, you know, disseminate information for them to just grow as students, but also just to be like their peer and to be their mentor as well. And I think that like that experience was really important for me, because it made me realize, you know, how much I really valued kind of the mentoring aspect and teaching aspect of what I do. And then I've definitely talked about like how I was really passionate about that in my application. That was kind of like one of my really big themes, like in my application, was about teaching and about mentoring. And then the scribing experience was definitely more like medically related. And that really provided me with like a more hands-on experience one-on-one with a doctor. So I scribed for a cardiology clinic, and it was a private practice and there were like 6 different cardiologists in the group, all different subspecialties. And for those of you who don't know what a scribe is someone who kind of uses the electronic health record and kind of writes down the doctor's notes as they're seeing patients. And I think that like that experience working one-on-one with the doctor, I really got to understand, how does the doctor think? Like, how does the doctor talk to the patient? How does the doctor prescribe a treatment? How does the doctor think about like what's going on with the patient and how to work with the patient? And I think like I learned most of that and a lot of medical terminology through that scribing job. And I felt like that really prepared me well in starting medical school and things like that. So yeah, I would say that those 2 experiences were definitely important for me for my summers.
As for me, the 2 main experiences I had were working at the biotech company. So that's really what I did for my 2 summers. Since I was working there full time, I didn't really have other commitments during those summers, but the internship at the biotech company was really important in shaping my trajectory throughout the rest of college. I first started out as an MIMG major, and then after my experiences working with the biotech company, specifically in their neuroscience department on an Alzheimer's drug that they're developing, I realized that I'm really interested in the brain and specifically Alzheimer's disease. So after those experiences, I switched my major to neuroscience. I was also really passionate about volunteering with individuals who have Alzheimer's disease or dementia. So I started working and volunteering at retirement homes, and then I formed an organization related to that. So really, my 2 summers at the biotech company were really, they were really important. So I talked a lot about that on my applications, and I talked about how it shaped my interest in neuroscience and Alzheimer's disease, and then why I'm interested in pursuing that potentially in medical school. So that experience was really a big part of my application process, and then also was something that I discussed in detail during my interviews as well.
Okay, I'm gonna put the question in the chat. Do you know of any good resources that have summer opportunities for pre-meds? And as an aside, does anyone have any recommendations for social science or public health summer research programs to apply to?
I feel like this is probably a better question for Asim because she knows a little bit more about UCLA, but I know at least like the clinic I worked at in the summer, the Diabetes Research Institute, it's called Sanson Diabetes Research Institute. They usually had like 1 or 2 internships over the summer where people would apply and they would just have someone work over the summer with them. But I think really just anything that you're interested in and you can get involved in, whether it's just like emailing a professor that you found the class really interesting, or just talking to people who are in your classes and seeing what they're doing, because I know it's specific for every school, can be really easy ways just to kind of get a list of things that you could see yourself doing over the summer.
For me, like I said, for the teaching jobs, that was more like within campus. But for my biotech internship, which I did at Edwards Life Sciences, I was initially like, not that I stopped being a mechanical engineer, but like I double majored and I didn't become a bio major until later in my undergrad career. So I started off being a mechanical engineering major, and there was there's something called the National Society of Black Engineers, and they have like a convention every year. So like I got to go to it, like I got a scholarship to go my sophomore year, and they just have tons of companies that are like interviewing people on the spot. So that's kind of how I got that job. And there tends to be like different things like that within different fields, depending on like what your major is. In terms of other like social science, public health summer research programs, there's so many. I'm trying to look in my Google Drive for like all the ones I applied to sophomore year, but I know like SMDEP, or I think it's called like SHPEP is one. And they have a site at UCLA, they have sites at other places. UCLA Prep is another one for people who've like applied to, I think, medical school once, maybe, and then like they're trying to like didn't get in or trying to apply again. Johns Hopkins has a public health one. University of Chicago has one. But pretty much if you Google a lot of these things, there tends to be tons of them, and they tend to all have like deadlines around like February, March, or maybe an interview or so for you to start in the summer.
I'm not totally sure about like California specific programs because I am from Massachusetts, but I scribed through Scribe America, and that was like a pretty easy way to get a scribing job. And then I think you can apply to like NIH research positions. I just forget like what the name for it is, but you could probably look online.
There are also probably local, volunteer programs related to hospitals nearby where you live. And there are in the area that I was near, in Irvine near Newport Beach, there was a hospital there that had like an accelerated summer program where you could get like 270 to 300 hours of clinical volunteering work within one summer. So, that's something to maybe consider, is just, thinking about volunteering with your local hospital as well. There are lots of programs. I know that UCLA has like the Care Extender program, but yeah.
Yeah, I was also going to mention the Care Extender program. I'm not really sure of UCLA summer programs, to be honest. I knew that I wanted to go home to San Diego for the summer, so everything that I was looking for was in San Diego. And if any of you are from there or would like to be there during the summers, there are so many biotech companies there, or organizations that you can apply to, like the Salk Institute, and then there are a lot of private biotech companies too. So if any of you are interested in that, San Diego has really great opportunities.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about research. We got a question in the RSVP. When looking for research opportunities, does it have to be in the biology field, or can it also be in fields like sociology or psychology?
I can answer that. So I did all my research in undergrad from like the first semester through like my last semester in psychology research. I was a microbiome major and a psych minor, but I did a lot of research on like how emotion and bias impacts like physician decision making, when it comes to like dealing with difficult patients or psych patients. And I feel like talking about that was like really helpful for like my application. So it definitely doesn't have to be bio research by any means.
To add on to that, I also did not do biology research. I was actually working in a bioengineering, electrical engineering department lab at UCLA, where we work on creating medical devices using smartphone-based technology. So it really did not have to do with like chemistry or biology or neuroscience per se, but I think that medical schools don't specifically look for like biology related research. They just want to see what you're passionate about and see what type of work you've done in that lab.
Okay. For those of you who studied for the Mcat during the summer, what was your general schedule like? Did you self-study or take a formal course? And when did you end up taking the exam if you studied over the summer?
For me, I did it the summer that I was interning, which I don't know if I 100% recommend because it was definitely like a very stressful long summer. So basically for 2 months, so like early June to I took it August 17th. I remember that very vividly because I went to an Ed Sheeran concert afterwards. So August 17th, 2017. So I took it, and basically I'd go to my job like 9 to 5, and like because like where I live in the Inland Empire is really far from Irvine, at least traffic. So I would leave my work at 5 and go to a like library in the area and just stay there until it closed around 8, and then drive the like hour home before like maybe studying for another hour when I got home, like while eating dinner, and then basically do it like going to sleep and doing the process again. And then usually like wouldn't really do much on Sunday other than like go to church with my family. And then on Saturdays, I would just go to like the local library by my house and just like study pretty much all day. And then, you know, that's not to say that sometimes I went to the library and read other books for fun, because I tend to like just read teen romance trash instead of doing the work I should do. So not every day did I actually really study, but for the most part, that was the schedule I was trying to keep to. I didn't do any formal program. I just bought like I think there's like 7 books in this like Kaplan package MCAT thing, and I basically just read every single page of each of those books over the summer. And it came with like a set of flashcards. So like at work when I would not be doing anything, I would just like go through the flashcards. I know like I didn't know Anki existed at the time. So like Anki is definitely a more electronic way to do that. And my what is it called, like pre-health office kind of gave us like some free, I think it was called Next Prep. I don't remember the website for sure, but they had like MCAT practice exams, so I got to use a couple of those for free. And then I paid for some of the, I think, AAMC MCAT practice tests, and would try to take those like on Saturdays and then try to go over them as well. It takes a long time to go through those tests, and when you're done, it also takes a long time to go through all the answers for them. So just know that you should like budget a long time for that so that you can like actually work on the weaknesses that you discover from taking those practice exams. But yeah, that I would say that was like mainly the schedule that I went to. And like, but I still like had fun that summer. I went to concerts, I like went to San Diego Comic-Con, I like did a bunch of other stuff, but that was the like main schedule, and that was basically all the materials that I used to study for the exam.
I can go next. So I had a pre-med advisor that was like, I don't know, tough on me, and like at least for setting the expectations. He was like, yeah, you should aim for at least a 515 and you should study 500 hours. And I was like, okay, cool. And so then which is ridiculous, by the way. So I like set up kind of a schedule where I would study like 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then I took a practice exam every week. And I think that was what was most helpful for me, because I felt like I had a pretty good foundation from, class of like all the subjects. And because I was also like a psych minor and everything, the sociology and psych stuff was kind of more basic for me. And I didn't do any like class or anything. I used Khan Academy to brush up on topics that were harder for me, like physics and chemistry. But mostly it was just like going over questions that I would get wrong with practice tests. And I think that was like a good way of studying, because like for me at least, it was less about content review and more about like learning how to take the test, and learning how to budget my time on the test. Yeah. I also used like Next Step as like the testing. And I had like the Princeton review book, but I didn't really go through much of it.
I can go next. So I also did not take a formal course, but I used the 7 series Kaplan books. So I went through each of the books and then I would take notes from those books so that later on when I was reviewing that particular subject, I wouldn't need to go back to the book, but I could just review my notes from those respective sections. So I did that. I took practice tests from the AEMC website. I also used Next Step and then UWorld as well, which had great practice questions. My study schedule was it got kind of messed up because I was planning to take it during April. So I started April my junior year. So I started studying the beginning of my junior year. But since the quarter system is so fast paced, I often wouldn't get as much studying done as I wanted. So I would just try to at least do an hour a day. But during April, that's when COVID hit. So my test kept getting canceled. And then I ended up actually taking the exam in August. So I would study a few hours every day, especially leading the months leading up to it. I started studying more rigorously. So yeah, that was pretty much my schedule. I went through all the books first, and then I started taking practice tests to see how much of the knowledge I retained.
I can talk a little bit about my experience taking the Mcat. It was really hard for me. I'm not the best test taker, but I majored in cell and developmental bio at UCSB, and I felt like it did prep me for the exam. But I didn't really decide I wanted to go to med school until probably 2 years into my gap years. But right after graduating, I thought, okay, I'll just take it because everything's fresh in my mind. So I took 3 months after senior year to study for the Mcat. And I didn't really know what to do. So I decided to buy it's not necessarily a course. I guess it's like their self-paced course, but it's really expensive. And I used my work savings for it. And they basically give you videos and the books. And I just did not do that well on the exam. I had an antibiotic resistant bug at the time too. So I think that may have played a part into it, but I just struggled, I think, with studying for such a huge exam. So after that, I started working full time and I was like, you know what, I'll revisit it if I'm really interested in med school. And I decided I wanted to apply to med school. So I ended up taking it again 2 years later. And I had quit work at that point because I knew that for me at least, I just needed a full, free, flexible schedule to study for it. And I just supported myself doing tutoring and some swim lessons. But I spent most of my days studying just from the books when I did it the second time. I didn't purchase anything. And so I used old Princeton books I had, and then I think I got a couple Kaplan books to supplement from some friends. And then I just kind of did YouTube to also brush up on any topics that I wasn't really getting from reading. And the second time around, my score did improve, but I also took it for I almost didn't apply to UCLA because I just thought my MCAT score, even the second one, although it did improve, I just didn't think it was going to be in UCLA's range. And I ended up applying and it worked out, but I just don't want it to discourage people because it was something that was a huge stressor for me. But I think that a lot of medical schools nowadays really do look at you as a whole applicant. And I think too, the fact that I took it twice, they knew that I was trying really hard, but standardized tests are just, it can be hard to take standardized tests for certain people. So yeah, just don't lose your hope with the MCAT, and let me know if you do need any help. I learned a lot through taking it twice.
Okay, so if you took classes during the summer, did you take less, the same, or more classes? And also from the RSVP, we have a more specific question. Would you prioritize grades over medical experiences such as EMT work? Is it possible to make up for relatively low first year grades? Again, sorry, it's a loaded question, but it's in the chat to reference.
So I did not take classes over the summer, and I would say that you like can't really prioritize one over the other, like grades versus experiences. They're both important. So like ways to get around that are like, you can't, if you have the bandwidth, multitasking, like trying to get grades and doing things during the year versus like, grades during the year, doing experiences during the summer versus like you could take a gap year to get more experiences, which, it seems like a lot of us didn't take gap years, but the majority of our class, I feel like, did take, multiple gap years. So highly encouraged. It's great for, going straight through wasn't necessarily the best decision. Like you do need time to like be an adult and, have time to yourself, I feel like. But anyway, also in terms of like making up poor grades, you can definitely make them up. And they like to see the progression of like if your grades go up. And they also have like post-bac, 1 year post-bac programs for after undergrad, where like if your GPA wasn't that great in undergrad, you can do one of those 1 year post-bac programs and it still counts with your GPA to bring it up. I think that answers all of it.
I was part of the group that did take classes over the summer. I took them for 2 summers. And I would say that in terms of taking summer classes, I did end up taking less classes. And the reason why I took less classes was because summer was a great time to get experiences, and it's a good time because your schedule is a lot freer in terms of like your commitments and things like that. And I think that like that's something to keep in mind in terms of like loading your summer with experiences. It's like so I would say I took less classes for that reason. And then I agree with Zoe, it's not about like prioritizing grades over medical experience, because I think that they're equally important. And it's just about knowing kind of your limits and knowing kind of like what you need to put the effort in to get the good grades that you want, or whatever grades that you're looking for. Everyone's goals are going to be different. And then what experiences you're hoping to get, right? So like it's kind of a very personal thing to kind of ask yourself like, okay, how much can I realistically put into school to get the grades that I want, and then also to get the experiences that I need so that I can, be productive during the summer and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything they've said. Like I wasn't in the group that took summer classes, mainly because summer classes at MIT isn't really a thing. So I feel like it's just like you do the experiences that you think are gonna like fill you up. I feel like if you're doing an experience and you don't find it to be like moving you in any way, and you don't feel like it's helping you in any way, like you shouldn't do it, because it's gonna come through in your application that like you didn't care about that thing, nor did it really like grow you in any way. So it's like I think less about like what should you be doing and what do you want to do. And then when you sit down to write your personal statement, you'll find that like a story kind of builds from like the things that you did, because you'll be doing things you wanted to do. And then obviously, not trying to bite off more than you can chew with your classes. I think people sometimes don't do as well their first couple year or like first year or so, and then try to like overload classes later to try to like overload their GPA by trying to get a bunch of A's like later. And I don't think that's more helpful, because you end up overwhelming yourself, and then the grades don't necessarily as strong as they could be. So I think just like focus on the classes you can handle, doing as well as you can on those, and like they'll see the trend. And as long as like you having an upward trend along with doing the things that you want and can talk passionately about, I feel like people tend to be very like good about, at least more recently, looking at like the whole application and the whole person. So.
I think in terms of GPA, the thing I kind of realized later in college was I didn't really need to overwhelm myself with as many activities and orgs and work, all of the things I was doing, because the thing is you can't always do a post-bac, but I think it's better to just take your time, like get the GPA you want during college. Don't push yourself to do 50 different things if it's going to stress you out and you're not going to enjoy it and you feel like you're just doing it to check a box, because it's a lot easier to spend like a year or two in your gap years doing a bunch of things that you're passionate about and you kind of know yourself better, and just get the grades you want in college and spend the time doing that than it is to like overwhelm yourself with a million things during the 4 years and maybe take a hit on the grades. And I took 3 gap years and I loved them. Like it was a really important, I think, refresher for me, and like working in the real world and like working with so many different patients, and like I did so many consenting processes, like one-on-one with patients at like the diabetes center. And I think that all of that helped quiet like any questions I had about medicine, and just solidified that I wanted to go into it. But yeah, I agree. I think just with the upward trend comment too, if you didn't do as well as you wanted to freshman year, there's 3 more years that you can slowly climb your way up. And it also shows like your dedication and perseverance, because it's really hard to do that when you're feeling like maybe discouraged after the first year. But yeah, I'm a big like supporter of just doing things that you're passionate about. Like I was a Division I athlete for the first 2 years, so I felt like that took a lot of time, and it made me feel like maybe I couldn't apply to medical school. But I wrote about it as like one of my most meaningful experiences in my application, because like swimming for the like many years I did before that too created a lot of my personality, and also like bled into why I wanted to go into medicine. I also talked about like backpacking in my application. So yeah, just know that like it's good also to take breaks in your summers and do the things that you want to do in college, and you always have your gap years to like add on more if you feel like you need more experience.
Yeah, so Noni started talking about this not that long ago, but how long should I wait before deciding that an opportunity is not right for me? Do you have any advice on avoiding overcommitting to too many activities?
I think all I'll add to that from what I already said is like I think people have a tendency to do extracurriculars that they think are gonna look good instead of ones that they actually want to do. I think the only one that I will contradict myself on is like volunteering at a hospital, just because I feel like there are some schools where like they literally mandate a certain amount of hours they want to see from you. So like I think that's one thing where like you kind of have to suck it up and probably just try to volunteer if you don't already have that in some other way, like a medical kind of volunteering. But other than that, I feel like you should just do the things that you're interested in. And I think that if like you've done something for a semester and you don't really like it, that's probably when you should maybe move on to something else. Because I really do feel like it's not about how many things you do, but it's like how long you do it and how like deeply involved you get in it. Like they don't want to see that you are part of 10 different programs unless you truly like have been part of all those programs for like 2 to 3 years of your undergrad experience, and you were like holding leadership positions in all of them, and you can talk about like meaningful experiences for every single one of them. But on the MCAT application, there's usually like room to expand on 3 major like significant experiences that you've had. So like just I think I don't want like you obviously don't have to limit yourself to 3, but like that's a good number to think of in terms of like how many things have you maybe done for like a year or more that you took a leadership position in and that you could talk about passionately.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say it's like quality over quantity, and you know, like the longevity that you're involved in something is important. Like they want to see that like you really cared about that experience and you were involved for a long time. I would say that for me, like it was important for myself to like advocate for myself of like, you know, not getting involved in too many things, because like I was in a research lab where the PI, you know, she would ask lots of us, you know, to if we wanted to participate in lots of different things and whatnot. And there was a point where like I was doing even like outside of research, I was doing like 10 different things, and it was a lot. And so like I thought it was like important for myself to be like, actually like I'm good, you know, like I don't I don't have time to like commit to this thing, and you know, and usually most people respect that and and don't take it poorly. So I think being able to do that when you're like with someone who you think has like power over you or whatever is important.
I think also something that kind of I did, you know, I only added like, you know, one experience kind of at a time, and I kind of like tested the waters, and then added another experience when I felt ready to do so. And I think it's important to like, for me, it was important to ask myself, you know, like when I added a commitment, when I added a new experience, would I be able to put like 100% effort into it? And if the answer was no, then I didn't do it. And I think that that kind of helped me to avoid overcommitting, because it's definitely worse to put 50% effort into a bunch of different things than it is to put like 150% into like maybe only a few things. So that kind of helped to like kind of reflect on myself and ask myself, you know, like, oh, am I really able to put in the best effort possible for this activity? And so that helped me to avoid overcommitting.
I agree with everyone. And I think it's really important to focus on things that you are passionate about rather than just having another thing just for the sake of having it on your application. For me, when I was a freshman, I joined the Care Extender program because so many of my classmates and pre-med friends were a part of it. So I felt that this would be a really great opportunity. So I joined, and then I realized that this was something that I was not passionate about, and I didn't think I was really contributing at all to the organization. So after a few months, I quit, and then I joined the research lab that I was a part of for the rest of my 4 years of undergrad, and that was something I was really passionate about. So don't be afraid of quitting something if you're not interested in it, because another opportunity will come up that you are really passionate about and can put all of yourself into.
Everyone has such good responses. Yeah, I feel like this is such a good question to ask, honestly, because like I personally still struggle with that question in med school. Like if you're always going to have all these opportunities to do these really cool things, and you have limited time. So I think it's like a process of getting to know yourself too, and like being present with yourself when you're doing something and figuring out if it's actually bringing you joy or if it's just kind of like an obligation. But I think a big thing too that I've learned and I'm still learning is like setting expectations when you take on a project. So if you do have a PI who seems like they're gonna be really intense and like want a lot out of you, maybe like before you take it, even if you're really interested in this project and you really want to work on it, but you just don't know if you have enough time, I think like sitting down with the PI and being like, okay, this is what I can give, and I just want to put this out now before I take this on, so you know what to expect of me, will save you a lot of stress down the line and still allow you to like keep those doors open.
I also want to add, and this is something that I'm like still working on in med school and still not doing a great job of, but like when you realize you don't want to do something anymore, instead of like, you know, you find yourself putting in less effort and maybe not wanting to go to things, you should just like be honest with the people in charge and just be like, hey, I'm gonna finish this part that I know I signed up to do, and then like I'm gonna take a step back formally, instead of like ghosting organizations essentially, which is like not great either.
All right, and with that, I think we're just about to come to the hour. And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I think we're going to stop with the questions there. Thank you all so much for all your wonderful, very thoughtful, informative answers. I think, we've shared a lot of really useful, actionable things that people can consider doing, this summer, next summer, whenever. But yeah, if anyone has any last minute, like parting words, feel free to say them. Otherwise, that'll be it for tonight. Thank you. All right. Okay. Good night, everyone. Bye.